It's my honor to welcome the two stars of Birdman, Michael Keaton and Edward Norton. Who gave you your big break, or what do you consider your big break?
There were probably various few key moves, but honestly, it was fairly simple. I think I don't know that I had. In fact, I know that I didn't have $300 when I arrived here in my pocket, and I just did what most people do. I guess you just go and park cars and work on things and do it and try to figure it out. And I had done that much theater, and I became interested in writing, and I was also always interested in comedy, but my comedy was intensified, so while I was in class out here or in an improv workshop, I was writing and performing stand-up.
Was it all the same clubs that are there now, or was
originally it was the historic and legendary Improv in New York and Catch a Rising Star in New York, but out here it was Comedy Store and Second City Workshops and any little club. And in Pittsburgh, I had even started writing and performing. So the beauty of that is it's all you. You don't have to wait for anybody or ask anybody's permission for anything. A friend of mine who was a writer from Pittsburgh said, I don't know if this means anything, but I'll introduce you to some guy. And I got this gig, I got the gig.
On a show?
Yeah, on a television show, yeah. And that's how I got night shift, because one of the guys writing on it, Lowell Gans, who was these guys were really funny.
And Bob Lou Mandel, right?
Yeah, saw me and said to Ron Howard, there's this guy, and maybe you should meet him. He could be pretty funny, and so Ronnie meets me, and I did like 95 auditions or something. No, really, there were like 7 though, or something. I don't know. And then that was that.
And Edward, we were talking backstage about it's been almost 20 years since you filmed Primal Fear, which is amazing to think. What precipitated that film, and how did you land such an auspicious role? I mean, it's such an amazing debut. You really owned it, and it's kind of like how everyone got to know you, I think.
Primal Fear was just an incredible circumstance where a really good role, which normally wouldn't, be available, not be available, but where they would look for known entities. Yet you had a situation where the director, Greg Hoblet, had the, objectively, I think the really perceptive and wise impulse to put someone in it who nobody had ever seen before, because he was more interested in turbocharging the value of the surprise than he was in the collateral of a named person, and separate from the fact that it became this opportunity for me. I think that was ingenious, because it's very, very rare within the the various constructs and value systems in the industry that a director will really put their foot down and say, look, this is the mechanism that's going to make this work relies on us being just as surprised as Richard Gere's character. And if we can pull that off, we're gonna really have something. And so I can't. I've got to find an unknown quantity, and that became the gateway through which I got to have that opportunity, which was amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And how would you say the business of being an actor, which it is a business, as we know, has changed the most since you started? And how are the pressures different than they were when you first started?
I think it got, I'm really not the best person to ask, but one of the things I could possibly offer is it became real corporate real fast. And so therefore certain decisions, I think, in terms of casting someone or taking a chance or, it starts to shrink up, I think. But then art is an amazing thing, and creativity is an amazing thing, and you can't kill it. You'll never kill it, which is beautiful.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that last part, especially. I think I don't know. The business of the movie industry is a very different question than the business of being an actor. I think being an actor shouldn't really be a business. It's whatever you make of it. I think, and anybody who says that that they're trapped or that it's nonsense. You make your own decisions about what your values are and what your priorities are, and you work the way you want to work if you're lucky, and you make the choices you make. So I think the worst thing about being an actor is the lack of autonomy in a fundamental sense, because you're waiting for someone else to have interest in you playing a role, but at the same time you have an enormous amount of autonomy about what you want to work on and what you want to express or choose to focus on, and how you conduct yourself in and around the work, and then separately is all up to you. I think I just don't get it when people say interesting films aren't getting made. I just don't agree.
Yeah. Well, if any film bucks that, it's Birdman. And much has been made about the mechanics of this movie, of which sounded like there were many, from measuring hallways at the theater and you guys counting your steps to your marks. And I'm wondering, how did all of that inform the way you learned your lines? And I'm wondering how much improv we saw in those scenes, if any.
It didn't inform learning your lines so much as you had to be word perfect and off script and know your lines in order to make it work. And now that I hear myself say that, actually, and vice versa. I'm not sure that one. What do you think? That one necessarily informed the other. It could only work that way.
Right.
Given what this maniac from Mexico City wanted to make.
And his maniac DP too.
Yeah. Oh man, those guys. That team is unbelievable. And I'll tell you, someone who's, I keep mentioning this when I can, is camera operators. Just astounding what they did. Not, I know it's Chivo and Alejandro, but it was everybody, really. Truly everybody. Every movie is everybody. And I'm not being Pollyanna-ish to say that. It's just a fact. But this was like intensely everybody, right? Down to everyone.
What impressed me was Alejandro's ability to be conceptualizing, and he was in this process of discovery about the scenes themselves and the choreography of the camera work at the same time. And he was inventing both of the, he was kind of inventing it all at once. And sometimes he would say to the cast, take a few minutes and let me just figure something out with Chivo. And sometimes he would say to the camera crew, let me just take a few minutes and just work with these guys on the text. But for the most part, he was doing this, to me, impossibly complex integration of figuring out the actual emotional life of scenes while envisioning how he was gonna, visually roadmap it at the same time, which was obviously really unusual.
The making of the movie actually kind of dovetails creatively with what the movie is and what the story. There's so much in the film without sounding.
It's very meta.
Yeah, but it's a lot of. There's just so much in it without sounding too pretentious or just boring everybody to tears by this point. But there's so much in it, and what Ed just said in terms of what he had to do. It is meta. You're right. I'm sorry. I should just shut up now that I hear myself say it. I was going to see if I could go.
We love your description. Keep
I
going.
know. I was going to see if I could do every interview from here on out without using the word meta, but I don't think that's. I'm just not going to dodge it. So it all dovetailed together, and then you just keep getting more and more and more astounded by how this guy did this. And I'll tell you, I actually was thinking about this. I was going to ask you. My fear was that, wow, man, every movie after this, I'm so fearful that I'm just going to be bored out of my mind. The good news is I'm working on a movie now, and that didn't happen. I went, okay, that's not happened. What does happen? Wait till this hits you, dude. You'll be sitting there, we're doing a movie, and you'll be going and watching things set up and maybe running lines or talking about it, and then just kind of sitting there looking around. And you think about what he and everyone did to make Birdman, and you kind of can't believe it. You go, wait, well, how did that happen again? It's actually weirder and more amazing down the road than it is when you're, like way more than when you're in it. Because when you're in it, you don't have a choice. You just got to go to work, you know.
Right.
You're just there to bear down and make this whole thing happen. Later, when you look back, it's like almost being thinking back about, you know, almost a head-on collision you had in your car one time. You know, at the time you made the move, and like, you know, hours later you go, holy. It's kind of like that. You're sitting on set and
Well, it's
you
all
go,
instinct
what?
at that point.
And you kind of go, I should have never done that. I should have never tried that.
In terms of script, and you said it didn't change that much. You had it to be very on page when you showed up. How much of your own experiences in the business, in theater and making movies, being around creative people, many of whom are very eccentric, we'll say, did you infuse into the movie? Did you make suggestions for lines? And obviously the character of Mike Shiner, he's this like, you know, total hyperbolic sense of what we think of as actors sometimes. How much of your own experiences did you infuse in him?
I mean, the script of this film was incredibly, unusually realized. It was a very fully realized vision, and it was, with the exception of a major change that he made to the ending, about 2/3 of the way through shooting the film, he completely threw out a whole construct of the ending and rewrote it. It stayed very, very, very true to form, I would say. At the same time, it was sort of delightful that Alejandro's also, you know, he has a great sense of humor, and he really, really wants details about the, you know, the kind of esoteric foibles and pretensions of theater and things like that. And so if you, like I said to him, I think in the original script, the scene you just saw earlier, I think they had written, you know, you have any idea the actors who are on the stage? And then they were saying things like James Dean and blah, blah, blah. And I said to him, you know, no theater actor would say James Dean or name Hollywood people. They would say, if a theater actor
New York
was really,
people.
they'd say Helen Hayes and Jason Robards. So and he was, you know, he loved that. We tweaked it to be, you know, the giants of the actual stage and not sort of Hollywood people who either never were on stage or things. And there was lots of details, I think, like that Alejandro was looking for everybody to, you know, just throw a little extra juice into. But on the whole, it was really, it was not really a process of, they weren't doing a lot of rewriting while we were working on it.
Well, and that leads perfectly into my next question, which is, and clearly you did not have this problem on this film, what do you wish directors better understood about working with actors? What do you wish they better knew about what you need from them?
Well, since I'm not going near that one, Ed.
I think simplicity. I think directors sometimes think that talking about the totality of the meaning of a moment, talking about the film they're trying to make is going to be helpful to an actor, and it's the worst thing in the world. The truth is, actors, good actors, are I think, empaths. They are empathetic to situational emotion, if you want to call it that. And really all you need to do is, for me, I've always found if you just say like, don't criticize so much cajole, you know, don't mollify her, you know, discipline her, you know what I mean? It's like, that's all you need. Like, all you need to do is give someone a verb, really, and they can radically alter, and usually people will go, I think actors will go, oh, right, of course, done. Like, that's, but, you know, talking about everything is just crushing, I think, too, because it puts a person in their head, which is not where you want to be.
Wait a minute. You said this?
Yeah, but it depends on when you're talking.
Yeah, or who's doing the talking.
Yeah, on the set.
Michael, are you
But
sure you don't
I
have
think-
any stories you want to tell?
No,
I know you have probably hundreds.
I would say, because it's so different with everyone. For me, I would say don't fall too in love with, unless you're a handful of people out there. Don't fall too in love with what you're locked into in the moment, because by and large, actors are pretty good at finding something if you give them a little room, and it's different for every director, obviously. I remember reading a long time ago, it may have been John Ford, or it may have been John Huston or someone saying, really directing actors is really casting right. And I used to think, no, that's just lazy thinking. There's no way that's true, blah, 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 blah. I'm starting to think that's very true, actually. In most movies, if you really say that guy or that woman, or if you narrow it down to a few, a lot of it is pretty much done there. And I never used to believe that, but I'm starting to think that's kind of true.
No, I agree.
Well, and you watch this movie, and it's hard for me to conceive of anyone else playing these parts, and that's always a good feeling when you watch it and think it's just meant to be in that way.
When we were doing the first scene you showed, where our characters meet, I think we were ripping into it, and we were having a blast. I mean, we were actually, I would say we were quite happy. We did a bunch of them, and I think we were enjoying it a lot, and there was a lot going on that we were pretty happy with. And Alejandro came in and on that scene and really, when I say lit into us, he just was very, very unhappy with what was going on. He was tearing at his hair, and he was going, guys. It was a lot of like that.
What were his complaints?
And I remember, a lot of times we had a lot of. I mean, I had a huge amount of fun working with Michael. So and we had a very easy rhythm, I thought. So when someone comes in like that, I was kind of like looking at Michael like, how's he going to react? I love Alejandro and kind of was up for it, but he was coming in and
what did he say specifically about?
He basically said,
stop it.
He basically said everything. He basically said everything that you're doing is the exact opposite of what this needs to be. He really did. He said, I need it to go 180 degrees in a different direction. That's what he thought.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, you want, and if you believe in somebody, which I believe in him to the, on a cellular level, I'm like, great. So you want to be that? You want me to go 180 degrees the opposite? Let's do it. So we did, and we kind of lit into it, and did, I think, fairly different thing. And he came back and said, no, it's got to be like 180 degrees the opposite direction. And I looked at Chivo, because they've been friends since college.
The DP.
I just looked at him, just like, you heard that, right? Like you heard it. And Alejandro walked away, and Chivo goes, he's not talking to you, he's talking to himself.
Man, there's a lot of that. But
that was true. That was actually real wisdom, because
That's very helpful, actually,
when
to think of that.
this movie is all about ego, and look, someone comes in and says what you're doing is the exact opposite of what you need to be doing. You get a voice in you goes, I'm being disapproved of or whatever. And you got to let that go and realize that I think what Chivo's saying is right. Like, sometimes you just got to give somebody room you just got to, if they say black, just do black. And if they say, now let's try white, let's just do white. And if they say go back to black, just go back to black, because there's something that he's trying to figure out for himself that...
And he doesn't know until he has you in front of him doing it.
Yeah, and if you don't apply the full force of everything you've got to exploring what the idea is he's interested in, then how's he going to put away that idea and confidently say, that wasn't a good idea? I do think that's where actors sometimes have to just get over their instincts, and if you really trust a director, paint it 4 different ways just so that he can see why an idea isn't working and trust that you gave it your all. I think that's really important.
And he is enormous
Yeah,
fun.
huge fun.
When you're around a real artist, it's just, man, it's so contagious. You go, yeah, that's right. You remember that thing, why you want to do what you do, you know.
Fun is good,
Fun is good.
amidst all the work. For me, the theme of the movie is beautifully encompassed in a line that Edward has. Popularity is the slutty little cousin of prestige. It's a great sort of, I don't know, encapsulating view of Hollywood. It's what we all rail against when we're trying to do good work. And how do each of you try to navigate the reality of that in the choices that you made? Clearly, doing this movie is one way you're doing that. But how do you, for yourself, try to do good work and also recognize the popularity aspect is a real thing?
Ultimately, it's just doing good work. It's pretty simple for me. You just say, if you're making a student film for $4,000, or if you're making a giant movie for $400 million, you still basically do the same work, and you do the same work. If you have 6 lines in a movie, you work the same way if you have 6,000 lines in a movie. And in terms of the popularity aspect of it, it's I'm a realist. That's how it works, and sometimes you're popular, sometimes you're not popular. Nobody showed up at my house that I remember and put a gun to my head and dragged me out of the house and said, "You're going to do this for a living." It's on me.
I think that you gotta try to root yourself in motivations that are that actually, I think, make your life richer. I think what you hope for is kind of that E.M. Forster value of like connection. If you feel like you're really connected with people, and if the way people respond to it has that deep sense of like, this really said things or made me feel things that opened me up or made me feel less alone, or whatever, then that's very nice. That's very nice.
This is particularly so satisfying in that on that level, because the response is, I've done this a while and I've had all kinds of different responses, and this response is, a lot of positive response, but God bless. But this is. I use the expression civilian sometimes, but folks who aren't in the business in any way whatsoever, just people who come to the street, what they say, not that they say it, but how articulate they are, even on an emotional level, not necessarily even with their words, but mostly with their words, what they say, is so interesting. What they say to you, it's one thing to get a response from someone who does this, or is a cinephile, but just some 67-year-old woman coming out of a Safeway, explaining to you what she thought. It is unbelievably gratifying, and it's a blessing. Who gets to do this? Who gets to have this? Pretty great.